FromSoft has made countless tragic stories, but one stood above all. This was the most tragic boss in Souls history, a story that you could feel through your screen, and one that still impacts an entire franchise to this day. He was an ally, he became an enemy. This was a final showdown that the Souls community would never forget, and it's often regarded as one of the best FromSoftware bosses of all time. Let me take you back to 2017 and the DLCs of Dark Souls 3. The players who played Dark Souls 3 knew that they were playing a masterpiece, calculated, linear level design, with some unforgettable bosses that future FromSoftware entries would take inspiration from. Like, well, there's just so many to count. Anyone who played Dark Souls 3 and then played Elden Ring could feel that a lot of the magic of Dark Souls 3 was placed into that game as well. The theme of Dark Souls was fate. No matter what end to the story the Souls community decided to choose, the fate of the world rested on thy cindered hands. Dark Souls 3 was a love letter to the fandom of Dark Souls 1 that explored the fate of Lothric the way DS1 players explored Lordran. The goal was the same: link the flame or choose an age of darkness. Do what you want, but players also knew that they were not exactly the good guys either. There were no good guys in Dark Souls, and even the good characters like the Onion Knight, Solaire, and more died or sacrificed themselves in the name of what they believed, and that wasn't always clearly expressed as good things. Solaire taught Souls players to look for the light and praise the sun, but his punishment for believing in the sun was turning into a parasite and fighting you. Plus, he swore allegiance to the Nameless King, who you could argue was a good guy, but everyone in Dark Souls has selfish intentions. We're dealing with kings and gods after all. This expressed in gloomy storyline would leave Souls vets with a feeling of emptiness once their story was over, and the Soul of Cinder was defeated. It was beautiful, but it was an ends to a means to link the final flame and bring the fate of the cycle of flame plaguing Lordran, a fate that the lords themselves were too cowardice to proclaim. This brought the Souls community to the Ashes of Ariandel DLC, a world within a painting-like place, and to enter this DLC, the player base had to speak to an NPC named Gael.
Wait, you've the same scent as that woman. Then you must be an action one. You must be. You don't know how long I've searched. Oh, don't mind me. Didn't mean to fall apart. Now, Ashen One, I have a kindness to ask of you. My lady lives in the cold land of Ariandel. I need you to show her flame. A proper flame that will burn the rot away. If you truly are ash, then it must be fire that you seek. Thank you. They of ash never fail. Just a moment, then. The painting of Ariandel. Well, rotted scrap of it, that is. Go on. Take it. Touch it.
Gael was once a slave knight, a category of knights who, as they were undead, were used as fodder in the bleakest of battles. And even if they grew decrepit, even if their skin charred black, even if their bones twisted, they would still never be relieved from duty. This would turn them mad, understandably. Their stature signified by their vibrant red hoods. At one point, Gael managed to free himself from this horrid life of bloody battles and ended up in the painted world of Ariandel, a refuge for the forlorns. unwanted souls who had no place to call home. Since players were also these wandering, unwanted souls in Dark Souls 3, I mean, everything in the game is trying to kill you, so I would think that you're unwanted, Gael offered them a place to maybe call home. This was headed with a church in the smack dead center of the painted world of Ariandel, which contained 2 NPCs important for this story. A boss that, if this video gets 1,000 likes, I will make a video about, named Sister Fried, Miyazaki's foot fetish having 3 phases of HP loving super nun. The other, a little girl simply called the Painter, or as Gael likes to call her, Lady. Lady is the biggest mystery of Dark Souls. She's essentially a higher power being, a girl with the ability to paint places for people to live safely, free from all the stress and wars of the world. She has the power in her paintings to craft these worlds.
Thou art Ash. Thou hast a pact made with Uncle Gael, so I wish to tell thee all. Behold its size. This is my canvas. It's to be a cold, dark, and very gentle place. But first, I must see Flame.
Gael would meet Lady and find purpose in protecting her, helping her for her next painting as best he could. After all of the horrific tragedies of war and himself being used as a pincushion, Gael found his calling, and it was being a father figure to this little girl.
I feel the scent of ash upon thee. Thou art the one of whom Uncle Gael spoke, the one to show me Flame.
Gael was also attached to Souls veteran stories too, as he could be summoned to defeat Sister Fried, but with his smaller stature and his weaker moveset, Gael could only keep up so much. After all, he was old, and didn't have the same moves as when he first stepped on a battlefield. Later on, and picking back up from where the fight with Sister Fried took place, Gael returned to help our journey in the Ring City DLC. This one was focused on a hidden pygmy kingdom that Gwyn sealed off in Dark Souls 1. He made a kingdom for everyone who possessed a fragment of the flame, so it made sense that the pygmies had a kingdom themselves. This is your character's home after all. It was just another tragic joy to explore this place. You could see the sheer beauty of landscapes while acknowledging that the world was folding in on itself around you. Gael was still willing to stick it out because maybe, like his lady, you might have given him purpose too. Growing stronger with his newfound purpose as he helped you take down Sister Fried, he also helped you take down the demon princes. It is tragic to know that the prince's arena was in the remnants of Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls 1. And even more tragic to know that, well, if you played Dark Souls long enough, you'd be asking yourself the same question. Are we going to fight Gael? I mean, the Onion Knight sacrificed himself in Dark Souls 3, so maybe not. But then again, Gael is here a lot, the same way Solaire was in Dark Souls 1. By the end of the DLC, taking in the last city remaining that had been untouched by darkness, Souls players knew the answer to that question. In a gigantic climb of ring knights, ring giants, and ring dragons sat the player's decision to speed up time. It's not really clear if the city was a facade held together by Filianora's egg in this DLC, but it does set one hell of a stage for a fight with an old friend.
What? Still here? Hand it over, that thing, your dark soul. For my lady's painting.
Do you not remember me? Seriously?
God, what's happened to you, man? You've beefed up, haven't you?
Gael was the ultimate showdown. His only purpose was to get the soul for his lady's painting, so he could live free and away from all the horrors he had experienced before. An idea more so than a real outcome. If Gael's cutscene and poses, and maybe even his attacks look familiar, it's because they were, especially if you've read Berserk. The way Gael moved and fought in the first phase was very similar to how Guts from Berserk did when using the Berserker armor. Even in the second phase, the repeating crossbow, which was almost reminiscent of Guts' repeater crossbow, and the way he hid away from attacks with his cape, would remind you that FromSoftware is always reading Berserk. Gael also had one of the largest health pools in all of Dark Souls, next to Midir, who we have talked about before. Gael attacked with such ferocity, yet fluid predictability, that I would never call this one of the hardest bosses the way that some like Orphan of Kos and Melania were, just because those bosses were relentless. I would call Gael's fight a more engaging one. It was clear FromSoftware wanted a battle of two of the strongest beings at the edge of the world who were evenly matched, as every single time Gael gave you an opportunity, it felt fair, and every attack he threw at you felt readable. Some of his attacks would even reappear in later FromSoftware entries, like the Lionel bosses and others in Elden Ring that I'll let you go find for yourself. FromSoftware really wanted to stress this feeling of the edge of the universe, as Gael's arena was the largest in the entire franchise. At about a third HP, Gael would transition into Phase 2, and tragically would learn that he possessed the blood of the Dark Soul as well. With that said, was it his sacrifice for his lady, or would it be a means to peace by defeating you and taking your blood, to drift to his own paradise once and for all? Maybe it was this realization of seeing the blood of the Dark Soul that brought out some humanity in this much larger and beastlier version of Gael. No matter, that wasn't the Souls community's problem, and since nobody is the good guy in this story, it was on them to make fate come back to Gael. These phases each get more intense over time, with lightning and even soul-unleashing cries of help from Gael. It's like the souls of the victims he consumed looking for the Dark Soul were being used for his attacks. He was crafty too, a sign of an experienced warrior, as when you'd think you could get an attack on him, he would just flip again and slam you for large damage. Again, it never felt unfair, but it did bring a tear to many of eyes once this man could finally rest once and for all.
Heal! God damn it! Take it! Yes! Yes! Alright, Gael. See you next time, mate! Woo! Go on 'em, motherfuckers! Woo!
What's even more tragic, bringing the Dark Soul to Lady's painting.
The world, those absorbed by fire, must not paint the world. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten, Mother. My thanks, Ashen One. With this will I paint a world. Please tell me thy name. I would name this painting after thee. My thanks. I will paint a world of that name. 'Twill be a cold, dark, and very gentle place. And one day, it will make someone a goodly home. I wonder when Uncle Gael intends his return.
Slave Knight Gael will always be a legendary boss to many a Souls veteran, an ally turned equal matched enemy. Both of you were not in the wrong in your stories, but the player gets to retry and retry until the deed is done. Not fully unlike a Slave Knight who gets thrown out to certain death, then to go back in the next day. This fight is still the most tragic one in Souls history to me, and it's a poetic end to a franchise like Dark Souls as a whole. There are no heroes, just players in their own game. My name is Evan, and hopefully I explained that pretty well. Thanks for watching.